Great. Okay, and one thing we're going to do right now, actually our interpreter was just able to join us, so I appreciate everyone's patience again. I'm going to go ahead and mute. You'll see some information pop up for interpretation shortly. Thank you. So hello, everybody. We have our translator on board. She's listed as Linguistica. I believe her name is Noemi. Noemi, before I start the interpretation, I'd like to give you the opportunity to provide an introduction and instructions for those who need to use the Spanish channel.
Hello, buenas tardes.
Good evening, our interpreter. Do you have some instructions that you'd like to share for how to use the channel prior to me sending your line over to the Spanish language channel?
Bueno, sí, hoy vamos a tener la interpretación en español disponible para que puedan escuchar la interpretación. Si está usando un dispositivo móvil, entonces hay que oprimir en la pantalla, seleccionar donde aparecen 3 puntos. Ahí le van a dar en interpretación de idiomas y seleccionan español. Después silencian el audio original para que así puedan ya solamente concentrarse en estar escuchando la interpretación hacia el español. Y si están utilizando una computadora, en la parte inferior de la barra que aparece en la parte inferior van a ver un globo que dice interpretación y ahí le van a dar seleccionar español para que luego ya puedan escuchar y de nuevo le dan a silenciar el audio original para que no tengan que estar escuchando 2 idiomas a la misma vez. That's it.
Great, thank you. And that is actually Daniel, who is our interpreter. So we're going to get that channel started right now and following his instructions that will be available using the interpretation button. So Daniel, we're going to send you over there. Please let us get him situated for just a moment.
Sure.
Okay, great. So we are actually all set up. Thank you everybody again for your patience. We do now have our interpreter on the presentation and they are available through the interpretation option. Just as a little bit of a reminder for myself and for our panelists that our interpreter is going to have to go a little faster than we are used to going. So to help make up for that, I will be slowing down my presentation a bit. So we will have some pretty thorough discussion here, a lot to cover, but just please keep that in mind. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started with the city's presentation. Again, thank you everybody who has come and is on the line. We ask you to please submit your questions to the question and answer box. My colleague, Nathan Gutierrez, is here to help answer those questions, and we will be answering them at the end of the presentations. Again, my name is Brianna Carrier. I'm an assistant to the city manager here in Bakersfield. What we have listed is the redistricting email for the city of Bakersfield process. If you have any questions at any time or comments, you can send any comments to that email address. This phone number that's listed is also my direct line here at the city. And we also have all of our redistricting process on our city website. This is one link that you can use. I will also show you how you can get to the website from the main page later on in the presentation. All right, so take a quick look here. This is the current city of Bakersfield ward boundaries. So this probably looks familiar. In the southeast corner, Ward 1 is represented by Councilmember Eric Arias. Ward 2 towards the middle in green is represented by Councilmember Andre Gonzalez. In the northeast in orange, Ward 3 is represented by Vice Mayor Ken Weir. In the northwest corner in this purple color is Ward 4, represented by Councilmember Bob Smith. In the lower southwest corner, Ward 5 is represented by Councilmember Bruce Freeman. Ward 6, this purple, represented by Councilmember Patty Gray. And Ward 7, this center blue portion is represented by Councilmember Chris Parlier. Of course, we also have our esteemed mayor, Karen Go, who was voted in at large. Some information about redistricting, and one comment I would like to make before I begin on the content. You will see that we have Redistricting Partners logo in the corner of our slides here. We also have a staff person on the call from Redistricting Partners. They are the consultant that the city has contracted with to help us with our demographic analysis for the city ward boundaries. And they have also provided us technical assistance on a lot of these slides. So that's why you will see their information at the top. So just a bit about redistricting. Redistricting is the process of adjusting ward lines every 10 years after the release of the US Census. The well-known examples are congressional and state legislative districts, but local governments also must do redistricting. Beyond creating districts of equal population, redistricting also serves to empower local communities and preserve voting rights. Traditional redistricting principles. There are a number of criteria that have been used nationally and upheld by courts, and this is what we are keeping in mind when we are drafting our proposed maps. They must be, for each ward, relatively equal in size based on people, not citizenship, must be contiguous, meaning that the districts or wards do not hop or jump. They must maintain communities of interest, which we'll talk about. They must follow city and census designated place boundaries, and these can be very obvious boundaries, very obvious landmarks, things like highways, things like physical features, something that really would make sense to understand as a place boundary. And the wards must also be compact, both in appearance and in function, meaning you would not want to stretch a ward. So public hearings, the council shall hold at least 4 public hearings, at least 1 hearing before the council draws a draft map of the proposed boundaries, at least 2 hearings after council draws a draft map of proposed boundaries, and at least 1 hearing or workshop shall be held on a Saturday, Sunday, or weekday after 6 p.m. This chart here is important, and all of these dates are also on the city's website. And this shows you an overview of the city's process so far. The city's first public hearing was held on Wednesday, August 18th of last year during a city council meeting. We have since that date hired Redistricting Partners who came on board and held a virtual staff-led workshop in December, similar to the one we're holding tonight. Our second public hearing at the City Council was heard on January 19th. The recording and agenda for that meeting are also on our website. Tonight's meeting is another staff-led workshop. That's the Tuesday, February 15th date. And the next 3 meetings will all be public hearings. They will all be during City Council meetings. And City Council meetings are held in the City Council chambers. The address is listed at the bottom. All of those meetings will be agendized to be heard at 6:00 p.m. The meetings themselves do begin at 5:15 p.m. If there are any items on the agenda prior to the meeting, they will be paused to start the meeting as close to 6 p.m. as possible. A special note about the next meeting, Wednesday, February 23rd, the only item that is going to be presented to City Council is redistricting. So this is going to be a very important meeting for the community to come to or to provide comments for. Remember, it is beneficial for us to have those comments as early as possible so we can prepare them for the council meeting and our agenda deadlines. But that meeting will be essentially focused strictly on redistricting so that we can get commentary on that. Following those two meetings on Wednesday, March 16th, will have to be the first reading of the ordinance adopting map boundaries. Now, the final adoption, the final vote will take place at the 5th public hearing that is in April, but the time in between February and March will be very important in making sure we have all of our feedback incorporated. So moving forward a little bit and taking a look at time, doing good. As far as participation goes during this process, council shall make a good faith effort to do all of the following: provide information to media organizations, including to minority communities, provide live translations at hearings or workshops pursuant to request, publish the date, time, and location of public hearing at least 5 days prior, publish draft maps at least 7 days before they are adopted, record and prepare written summaries of draft map comments, and maintain the website that is on the city's website for 10 years. Now, communities of interest is a requirement that was added with the Fair Maps Act of 2019. And communities of interest is an opportunity for the public to identify essentially building blocks of districts like they're listed here. A community of interest could include ethnic and language minorities and other groups, but they are really meant to be as subjective and open-ended as possible. Communities that are covered by the Voting Rights Act that are also considered are Latinos, Asians, and African Americans. While communities of interest may include race, it cannot be the predominant factor in drawing district boundaries. I have here just a list to get your wheels turning about what could possibly be of community of interest. Things like historical communities, religious facilities, if there's concentrations of languages spoken, if we have downtown or urban areas that are designated. These are all communities of interest. What is not a community of interest? There are 3 things that the Fair Map Act explicitly prohibits, and those are communities of interest based on political party affiliation, incumbents, or political candidates. It's also hard in redistricting to try and group similarly minded people who do not share a similar geographic location or are citywide. An example of that could be something like a sports team fans. I've seen that example a few times. If Lakers fans cannot become a community of interest within the city of Bakersfield, it's far too diluted to be effective. Also, does the community have a shared culture, characteristics, or bond? Is the community geographic in nature? Is the community able to be mapped? Describe the community's relationship with the jurisdiction and how is it affected by the policy decisions made by the elected officials? So just a little bit of a peek into some resources you will also find on the city's website. We have a couple of ways that you can submit this feedback. Of course, you can also always submit comments and emails to the redistricting inbox. We have received some comments that way. You can also use a SurveyMonkey form that is available in both Spanish and English online. And we also have a PDF form that can be printed out. PDF form also has a QR code just in case it is easier to do that online. The city's website also has resources for how to submit a proposed map. We have received 2 public map submissions. One of those groups is going to have the opportunity to present at the conclusion of the city's presentation. And those maps can also be found on the city's website. This is just a screenshot of the city's mapping tool. You can print this out using some of the census population data that has been compiled here by our consultant, and use this to both propose ward boundaries and communities of interest. Great. So we're going to start getting into some of the draft maps. The one that you see in front of you is the existing wards. If you take a look at the differences between the 2010 and 2020 census, you'll see that the city of Bakersfield has grown 16.1% in population. It's an immense growth. We've also hit that 400,000 mark at last. And just a little bit more about that change in population percentage, that is twice the rate of growth as the state of California. So Bakersfield really is sounding good to a lot of people, a lot of growth in that 10-year period, and anticipate that that can continue. I am going to give a bit of a preview for some of the draft maps here. So draft map A, as provided by our consultant, is a minimum change map. It does have 2 Latino voting age population wards, minority-majority districts. Draft map B, it unifies the north and the east. It follows major highways. So for draft map B, the predominant criteria for those lines is highways, keeps areas around CSU Bakersfield together, and also has 2 voting age population districts. For draft map C, it's very similar to draft map B. However, the predominant factor that is leading where those ward boundaries are is the river and canal areas within the city. So taking a look at draft map A, these are the new proposed boundaries for draft map A. Our consultant has also provided us with overlays. To quickly explain the overlays, the colored areas that you see, those are the existing boundaries. So those existing boundaries that are bounded by a line will actually become part of a new ward. One note as well, you will see some shaded areas on these maps that are outside of our boundary lines. This is an item that we are reconciling as far as our boundaries. It does not impact population greatly, and we do have the correct line boundaries now, but you'll see that shaded areas, this is part of the city and will be included in our maps. So just quickly going back to draft plan A, the differences that you are going to notice for draft plan A, the minimal change map, come mainly from wards 3 and wards 4. Ward 4 would subsume some of this area of Ward 3, right around Snow Road and Callaway up here. And then also in Ward 1 and 2, there's an area of Ward 1 that would become part of Ward 2 here. Okay, and those would be the new boundaries. Draft plan B. Now draft plan B looks somewhat different. Something else you will see change when we have our maps updated is we will not be using letters. This is just the draft way the maps have been put together. These words will largely align with the majority's area of the wards that were there before. So what you'll see here is a bit of, quite a bit of change for the southeast portion of town. Again, draft map B follows a highway designation. So we'll take a look at this compared to the old map boundaries, current map boundaries. So you'll see there is quite a bit of change. Just going quickly, again, these numbers do not align, and that will be updated. In the southeast here, this gray area is Ward 1, Ward 2 being this purple area. In the northeast, this is 3, and that would cut off right about here. Ward 4, 5, 6, and 7 as far as where the color coding is concerned. So between draft plan B and the existing wards, there is some significant change. Looking at draft map C, again, this is the map that follows the lines of the river and canals in the city. So only slight changes really between B and C. But again, these will align with the numbering, at least for the current wards. And you see that there is similar changes in the southeast. Okay. So we do have ward by ward detailed maps available on our website. I can also go through them in this presentation if there is that request. I do want to be cognizant of our presenters' time. So I will finish my next couple of slides just with some next steps for the city's process, and then we'll hand it over to Ms. Laurie Passante for the presentation of her organization's map. But again, looking forward, the council can make use of these mapping options in a number of ways. They can identify their preferred plans with an understanding that none of these are final plans. They can suggest possible changes. The community can suggest possible changes, and redistricting partners will provide us with adjustments to those boundaries. They can also fill out the demographic data for us. And again, if you have those possible changes, it is great to have them in as soon as possible. So that gives our consultant time to prepare that data for our hearings. And we have also put these out for public input. We have received a couple of comments by email, questions mainly about the maps. So you are always welcome to submit comments and questions. We do include those and we do send those on to our consultant as well. One more time, taking a look at the remaining calendar. So if you'd like to continue to stay involved and track this process, these dates will be very important from now until April 6th. Okay, I'm actually not going to open up to questions just yet. We're going to pause here, and I am going to get our next speaker ready and elevated so that she can share her screen. Give us just a minute. Good evening, Ms. Passante. Can you just confirm you can hear us and you are able to share your screen?
I can hear you, but I cannot share my screen quite yet or rename myself.
Thank you. Please try now.
I can share my screen. Thank you so much. My name is Laurie Passante, and I am representing the Kern Equitable Maps Coalition. We're a group of individuals and organizations in Kern County that have been learning about redistricting for the last year and a half and participating in redistricting processes throughout the county and at the state level. If at any time I'm speaking too quickly for our interpreter, if you could please let me know, I'd be most grateful. I want to thank the City of Bakersfield for giving me this opportunity to explain the reasoning for the map that we have submitted. And certainly we look forward to hearing any feedback from the council members or from the community, either at our Equitable Map Coalition standing meetings on Wednesday evenings, or by emailing me directly so that we can make adjustments to our map proposal to further improve it and make sure that it truly meets the needs of the community. We became involved in redistricting and decided to invest a tremendous amount of time and energy and resources into ensuring that the community could participate meaningfully, because redistricting is the community's ability to ensure fair representation for everybody in the community for 10 years. It is our chance to make sure that the lines are drawn in such a way that everyone is fairly represented. And in particular, we started working at the Board of Supervisors, and we collected all sorts of community of interest surveys at food banks and vaccination clinics and flea markets, public events, and we sent it out digitally as well, asking people about their communities and helping them to become involved in our educational sessions so that people could learn about the maps and how to create maps. And we now have coalition spaces up and down the Central Valley that have successfully submitted many, many maps and really had some tremendous amount of learning going on in the process. Once we created those community of interest surveys and started engaging with the community in all these different ways, we had folks join with a demographer to actually draw maps and submit maps, and then to learn how to advocate for their communities and for their interests at redistricting hearings, which is exactly what's happening here in the city of Bakersfield now. And we continue to vet, refine, and support the map over time to make it the best possible evolution of the map. The first thing that we teach people about redistricting is that you have to follow some rules, and it's a hierarchical situation where the number one really means number one. We're looking to make sure that each district has as close to equal population as humanly possible. And you'll hear the words deviation or variance used to describe that. We try very hard to make sure that our districts are as equal in population as humanly possible. We also care very deeply about making sure that the Voting Rights Act is followed. And I'll speak a little bit more later about the extent to which the city of Bakersfield needs to adhere to the Voting Rights Act as well. And then, as Brianna mentioned, other factors as well. We like to think of it like this. The Voting Rights Act and the equal population factors are the big rocks that have to get considered first. And then you can start looking at some of those other factors. What does that look like for Bakersfield? Well, as Brianna mentioned, we have seen tremendous growth in the city of Bakersfield. And in particular, we've seen tremendous growth in our Asian and Latino populations. And as a general proposition, we've seen demographics shift in such a substantial way that really it's extremely important in this redistricting process that we're paying careful attention to the way the Voting Rights Act obligations are met. And our analysis shows that the city of Bakersfield is now required to draw at least 3 of its wards, at least 3, that has a percentage of, in this case, Latino population, because they are the ones that have the population that exceeds 50% in a given ward of eligible voters. So in other words, people who are 18 years of age or over and US citizens. So people who, if they wanted to register to vote and vote, they would be eligible to do so. So when you see the term CVAP, CVAP, we're talking about folks that are eligible to vote, 18 years of age and older, and US citizens. And because the Latino population has hit certain population numbers such that they are a majority of the city of Bakersfield, the city of Bakersfield therefore has to be very careful to ensure that their vote is not diluted by creating districts where they are not the majority, where they need to be the majority. Now, the first thing that we did in the case of the city of Bakersfield when considering how to draw our map was to look at the current map. And we saw immediately that Ward 3 across the north is drawn in a way that really does need to get fixed because it negatively impacts all of the other districts in terms of meeting Voting Rights Act obligations. And one of the first things we noticed was this, and you can see the arrow pointing to where there's Norris and Fruitvale in the northwest is connected to the east side of Bakersfield by this. This is literally a 112-foot overpass that goes over a canal on Coffee Road right by the Cane's Chicken restaurant. And that's all that connects the current Ward 3, Norris, Fruitvale, West Bakersfield to East Bakersfield. And we knew that that was probably something that we would need to fix in order to meet Voting Rights Act obligations in the other districts. And you can see we did further analysis, and you see all those zeros in the maroon spaces there. That literally means 0 people live there. So not only is it tenuously connected, which really raises concerns about that contiguity requirement that Brianna mentioned earlier, but it's concerning to us that the remaining space along the river isn't very populated at all. So we questioned why it would be that this district would extend so far to the west and so far to the east. Again, further analysis, a hotspot cluster analysis that told us exactly the same thing. We really wanted to be very data-driven about the way we analyze the current maps. We also were concerned about the extent to which it did not fairly allocate political power, especially among protected class groups. And when I say protected class groups, I'm referring to our Latino population, our African American population, our Asian American populations, our Native American populations. We want to ensure that the folks that we have here that are protected under the Constitution in terms of their voting rights, that their votes are not diluted and that political power is fairly allocated among all 7 wards. And what we noticed was that the Norris Fruitvale area had numbers of populations there that were outvoting the constitutionally protected class members in the remainder of Ward 3 east of 99. This was something that was a big red flag for us. So we knew we had our work cut out for us. And again, further understanding of where our constitutionally protected class members are located in Ward 3. And so our analysis, as I've stated before, indicated that the city of Bakersfield should be creating 3 Majority Voting Rights Act wards where the percentage of eligible Latino voters exceeds 50%. And we also tried to make sure that other protected class groups that maybe didn't meet that 50% threshold, that they were kept whole as much as humanly possible in a Latino Voting Rights Act district so that they can vote in coalition groups. We wanted to make sure as well that our Asian communities and our Black communities had the ability to select candidates of choice in the city of Bakersfield. This is the Equitable Map Coalition Map. We made decisions based on our analysis of the current wards, feedback from community, and demographic analysis. What you're seeing here is a map that identifies where our Black residents tend to live in the city of Bakersfield, especially in high percentages. The larger the triangle, the higher the percentage of those community members in that area. We wanted to make sure that they were not split into, that they were kept whole as much as humanly possible. This is a current Bakersfield map, the current one that we have. And it's very close to what has been proposed as Map Plan A. And you'll notice immediately that the triangles are split into 1, 2, 3, 4 wards, rather than being kept whole as much as humanly possible in as few wards as possible so that they can have sufficient voting power to elect a Black candidate of choice. Again, we see with our Asian populations that the wards, especially between wards 6 and 7, this is the current Bakersfield map, and Map Plan A tends to do this splitting of especially our Punjabi, Indian, and other Asian American communities in Bakersfield. And so we identified this as a problem that we wanted to fix as well in the Equitable Map Coalition map. This is the equal population component that I discussed earlier. Our Equitable Map Coalition map draws the ward lines in such a way that they have extremely equal population. Our proposal currently has less than 0.5% variance, meaning that it has balanced population extremely exactly. We want to make sure, and we evaluate all proposed maps based on these variances being kept very, very low, as close to 0 as possible. This is the Equitable Map Coalition proposal, and I want to note that in particular, what you're seeing here is our Latino populations. You can see where they tend to be concentrated in the city, such that the Voting Rights Act obligations become pretty clear. And we have drawn Voting Rights Act districts where you see the red outline. Ward 1, which is the purple district here in the southeast, has an eligible voter Latino population of 59.6%. Ward 2 up here above it in the light blue color is 54.2%. And then Ward 7 is also a Voting Rights Act district that has 51.0 CVAP or eligible voter populations. So once we drew those 3 wards based on demographic analysis and we kept the population very, very equal, we were able to move around the lines and tinker with it in such a way that we maximized the percentage of African American folks being kept whole in, again, and I'll go back a slide so you can see, 1 and 2 for sure, And you see the percentages, we tried to keep it as high as humanly possible so that folks would have strong ability to elect candidates of choice. Ward 2 is at 19.1% eligible voter population in our Black community, and Ward 1 is at 12%, and Ward 6 is at 11%, so that we get into those double digits as much as humanly possible. And then finally, our Asian American populations, we noticed that they tended to concentrate in what you see here as kind of a beige colored ward here to the south, Ward 7, and then Ward 5 out in the west. And again, we're trying really hard to make sure that those CVAP numbers get into the high double digits as much as humanly possible. And so you can see that wards 1, 2, and 7 are our Voting Rights Act districts, and that in particular, Ward 2 is where we're going to have strong opportunities for Black candidates of choice at 19.1%. And in our Asian community, you can see that Ward 5 has a very high opportunity at 15.8% CVAP. We tried to make sure that all 3 protected class groups had strong ability to elect candidates of choice. It is high time that the city of Bakersfield has an Asian American council member, and that it be able to continue its long distinguished tradition of having a Black council member as well. So to summarize, all of the proposed maps that have been submitted by other groups and the other map plans A, B, and C, they draw only 2 Voting Rights Act districts where the Latino CVAP is above 50%, whereas the Equitable Map Coalition Map is the only map currently being considered that draws 3, which is what we believe the city of Bakersfield is required to do by the Voting Rights Act. I'm going to put a link in the chat, 2 links in the chat to be clear. One is to our interactive map. And you can see here a screenshot of what you will see when you click on our interactive web map. You can plug in your address into the field up above, and you can click on layers to see where you are in the current ward, where you would be under our proposal. And you can look up all those same constitutionally protected class layers as well, so that you can really get a sense of why we drew the lines the way we drew them. And if you see opportunities to make our proposal even better, by all means, please play around with the map and come join us at our coalition meetings on Wednesday nights. Our next one will be tomorrow night. I'm going to put a link in the chat to sign up for that as well. It's over Zoom and everybody is welcome. And I'll put that in the chat right now. And you can, of course, reach out to me directly at Passante@doloreshuerta.org. And let me place those links in the chat right now for everybody. And again, thank you very much to the city of Bakersfield for giving me this opportunity to explain our reasoning for our map and to give me the opportunity to encourage others to participate in this very important process. Thank you, Brianna.
Great, thank you, Laurie. And I'm going to go ahead and do one more thing for those of our participants who are on the call still. Do really appreciate you taking the time to share your community map with us. And let me share my screen one more time. Okay, so one thing I did want to show the group that is here is also for the city's website, how to most quickly find this information, as well as the information at least included in this presentation recording, so that you'll have access to both the city's presentation tonight and to the Equity Maps Coalition. This is the city's main website, bakersfieldcity.us. If you scroll over departments under city clerk, you will see ward redistricting. So that is where the city's information is. And there was one more publicly submitted map that I wanted to at least show those who are in attendance tonight. And this is public submission number 2. Ms. Passante's group's map is under public submission number 1. Public submission number 1 shows us what was submitted by the community group. Number 2 is what is provided from our consultant once they have done analysis on that feedback that we have received. So you can see, similar to our draft maps A, B, and C, we are provided with ward by ward data throughout these maps as well. So we were not able to have a presenter come tonight to present on this proposed map, but I wanted the community to know that their map information is also online. Also on this website, important to know, we have our dates for our upcoming hearing meetings. We also have recordings and agendas for past meetings, similar to what will be put on the website for tonight. And towards the bottom now, you will see some ways that you can continue to submit your community of interest feedback. And of course, that can also be done whatever way is easiest for you, by email, over the phone. We are happy to take that feedback, however that works. So I will actually pause now for those who are in the attendees portion of the meeting. If you have any questions, or if you would like to make a comment verbally, we can unmute you for that. So just give us a moment while we review any questions. Okay, great. We do actually have a question from our presenter, and I believe I can ask her to unmute. Laurie, when you are ready.
Thank you. My question is, can the folks who are on the call right now raise their hand and share the community of interest that they would like to see kept whole in the maps? Because I noticed that your map plans include a lot of references to keeping Cal State Bakersfield communities whole, but I haven't seen any input from people in the community asking for that. And I guess I just wonder if folks on the call right now might be able to give you input to share with the council members about which communities they want to see kept whole on the maps.
Great, thank you, Laurie, for that prompt. We do have a hand up from Emprez. I'm going to ask you to unmute, and just also keeping in mind our interpreter, if you could slow your pace just a little bit for them. When you're ready, please.
Yes, good evening. I am Empress Noah Tazikilelo, and I would like to see the African American communities kept whole. So my understanding is that they're in wards 1 and 2, and I believe the highest one was 5, or was with over 20%.
Great, Empress, thank you. And I'm going to actually ask our consultant who is on the call. Our consultant is actually the one who is helping us draft the maps. Sophia, is there any kind of feedback or prompts you can give to our attendees for what kind of feedback is most helpful when you are considering drawing those maps?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Brianna, if we could go to that slide in your presentation that has those 3 questions of prompts. Yeah, great. So these are some questions here, and I want to thank Laurie and everyone who's here with us this evening for your time. This is an iterative process, and so we're always looking for ways to improve all of the plans that have been presented to you and that the board will discuss. But in terms of communities of interest, we will also want to acknowledge that it is a term that only comes around once a decade, but at its core is this is a place in redistricting, excuse me, that really allows the community voice to be elevated. As Brianna mentioned in her presentation, this is also a criteria that is uplifted in the Fair Maps Act, which is a new California-based law that mandates cities and counties to follow some strict criteria to help with transparency. But in terms of communities of interest and sort of thinking through what is best for redistricting, these are 3 questions here that are just a starter. And that first one is to kind of think through what are the shared culture, characteristics, or bond that bound your community. And we have this one here because we have that traditional redistricting criteria that we have to follow. And unless legal counsel come forward and says that we have to draw specific VRA districts, we can't use race as the predominant factor in drawing a district. And so thinking through this, there's additional ways that we can think about race. We can think about where a particular group gathers, if there is a cultural festival, if there are languages spoken at home, if there are specific parks, if there are specific movements or work that a group works together. This is a really wonderful space to elaborate on that piece of race. And again, we can't use race as a predominant factor unless legal counsel comes forward and directs to draw a specific number of VRA districts. The second point to look at and consider is the community geographic in nature. In other words, can it be mapped? And I think Laurie's presentation gave a wonderful way to illustrate mapping communities. We saw that there were hotspots, and so that I think was just a really wonderful example of that. However, for communities of interest, you do not need any sort of census data or any city data. We are looking from you street names, or you can send us a screenshot of a Google map that you draw on. You can draw on the paper maps, or really give us as much detail in those streets as possible. And so this is the one that allows you to illustrate that verbally, or you can share a map as we've seen from the Equity Coalition. And the third one to think through and consider is that for this process, we are talking about representation. We are talking about changing or adjusting those ward lines, which has to do with your council members. And so describe your community's relationship with a jurisdiction. And so this instance, it is the city council members. So how is your community right now affected by what the ward lines look like? Are they currently split in multiple wards? Is your community currently kept together? And would you like to see that maintained? And so those are some just like prompts or things that are helping you think through that. But again, I think we've seen some wonderful examples this evening. And so I think for the caller who just spoke, that was saying that they'd like to see the Black community represented, I would do some follow-up questions of if you could share specific street names or a specific location, or again, if you'd like to send in a map that you've drawn or a screenshot, that would really help us ensure that we are not misinterpreting what you would like the city to look at. So I hope that helps, but I will be here for the remainder of the meeting to answer any follow-up questions. So thank you.
Thank you. And we have a hand raised from Emprez. Emprez, go ahead.
Yes, in regard to these critical questions that defines my community, our community, who developed the questions? That becomes very interesting to me. Who developed the questions?
I can take that, Brianna. For these specific 3 questions, we at Redistricting Partners have worked on these and gave these to the city. We have been working in this redistricting cycle with over 100 other jurisdictions on this process. And these are just things that we kind of thought of that we've seen to assist folks to think through what this concept is. But if you have a better way of thinking through these questions, or if you have any ways that we can improve these, we are here to listen. We are here to work on thinking of a way that we can make this concept a little bit more digestible. So, but we did give them to the city.
My apologies, but you said partners and we, and who, could you be a bit more specific as to who?
Redistricting Partners is the firm that is, we're a redistricting firm based out of California that is partnering or has been contracted by the city to work with them on their process. So Redistricting Partners is a firm, a company.
That's the name of the firm.
Yes, correct.
Is what you're saying?
Correct.
And you were contracted by the city of Bakersfield.
Correct. They put out an RFP that was public, and we applied as one of the firms, and we were the ones who awarded the contract. And if you have any more specific questions on that, I think Brianna or someone from the city may be more appropriate to answer those.
Yep, and if there is not any additional follow-up on our consultant question, apologies. Emprez, we still have time here for additional commentary and feedback. Thank you for your comments so far. I guess another question I will pose to our attendees, if it's helpful or not, is really, we have a timeline that we're working with to adopt our maps going forward. We will have the public hearing next week, where the council members will get another update, and that will include all of the maps received so far. I will be giving that presentation as well. And there is time to submit suggestions on those maps. I'm really just kind of looking for, of the resources that we have provided so far, which of them are the most helpful. Myself personally, as an employee here coordinating this process, I have had some community groups ask me to present to their group, and I'm happy to do that, happy to present a similar presentation as here tonight. So that is an open invitation, my schedule allowing, of course, but this is a priority. So if you have other groups that would be interested in receiving a direct presentation, that is an opportunity as well.
Is Laurie still, are you still there, Laurie?
I am, yes.
So would, in tomorrow's meeting, I would like to see these critical questions addressed. I think that it needs to be looked into.
Absolutely. And I took a screenshot of these questions for exactly that purpose, so that we can break it down and really connect it to what it means in terms of how people want to advocate for their community in this process. So yeah, I'm with you. Your questions are just really, really important questions.
Thank you.
Great, and great to see the dialogue as well. One other thing that I would offer when thinking about communities of interest is, are there other districts or other types of unification that these wards potentially want to be kept together? I do kind of like this bullet point, because I think that there are some communities here that potentially the city could have currently. So these are just examples. They don't have to be specifically these things. I can't really speak to too many that we have received that come from this list, but just another way to help think of some additional communities that could be represented together.
Brianna, is it okay if I add some additional things that may be helpful?
Yes, please.
Okay, I think too, in terms of the process and moving forward, the council does currently have 5 maps that they have in front of them to elevate or to amend. So as the community is looking towards the next public hearing, and again, Brianna, could you remind us all when that is, what time it is, and how the community can attend? So wonderful. So we have here, the next meeting is on February 23rd at 6 p.m. And are they able to attend virtually? Is it a hybrid meeting or do they have to attend in person?
Yes, the city council meetings, you have to attend in person for those ones.
Okay, so if you, when you attend in person, something that may be helpful to come forward with is whether you would like to see a map uplifted, whether you'd want to see a certain map supported, or if you'd like the council to ask for any amendments to any plans. These are draft plans. They are not, none of them are the final maps. And again, all 5 of the plans are currently ones that the board can look to move forward. So that may, in addition to hearing community of interest testimony, it may help the board hear which of the maps the community is in support of, or if they would like to see a new map being drafted. So this, that's additional context that may be helpful for the next hearing.
Thank you, Sophia, for that prompt as well. And if somebody is not able to attend the public hearings in person, we do also include any comments received by email, by phone if necessary, and we include that in the agenda packet for the city council meeting. So we do have an internal deadline to give staff time to prepare those comments. Any comments that are received after our agenda is printed and put out to the public have to be inserted in a blue memo. It's a kind of an internal staff thing, but we aim to have those in by 1 o'clock on the afternoon of a city council meeting. And that allows staff time before they have to prepare for another meeting, which starts at 3:30. Your comments, even if they come in after that 1 o'clock internal timeline that we have, they are still included, they are still considered. We do share them with the city council members. We do share them with our consultant as well. And I have a hand up again. Go ahead, Ms. Empress, when you are ready.
Could you repeat, please? You said there were 4 public hearings. Could you please repeat again the breakdown? There was 2 before, and I was trying to take notes. We're moving pretty fast here. And I know that the last one was 1 on Saturday, on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday. You had 2 before a certain time, 1 at a certain time. Could you repeat that, please? Let's see, council should hold at least 4 public hearings. Okay, before the council draws the map. And after, so you're saying 2 after?
Yeah, so the way it's written in the Fair Maps Act and added to election code was we must have at least 4 public hearings, at least 1 before council draws a map at all. So we held our first public hearing in August of last year before we had any draft maps. And then at least 2 after we draw draft maps. So our first hearing that we had after a draft map was in January, and we will have 3 more following that. And then at least 1 of those 4 should be held on either a Saturday, a Sunday, or on a weekday after 6 p.m. So,
Okay.
okay. Yep, and the remainder of the public hearings will also be heard at 6 p.m.
So to Laurie, the first public hearing then that was held last August, and how much notice, how much engagement was the public or the community given, um, and what type of notice was put out there? Laurie, you stated in your presentation that you've been working on this for like a year and a half. So I'm assuming that was around the time of the August, the first public hearing is when you began working on this, or the organization?
Yes, the short answer to your question is that I was present on August 18th. And if I remember correctly, I was one of only 2 speakers, and the second speaker was someone who I had asked to come help me see how things were going to be described and explained to be able to help the community understand how to engage. But people had received the standard 72 hours notice that's given for any council meeting, and it was an item on the agenda. But it was before Redistricting Partners was contracted as the consultant to help with the process. And there was no, to my knowledge, there was no other outreach. And so there was no community participation.
And the timeline for getting these maps finalized, could we get that date again?
Hi there, this is Brianna. So the council timeline that I have in front of you is the remainder of our timeline that we have. The city does technically have until April 17th because our next general election is in November, but the only city council meeting that falls before the 17th is on April 6th. So that's going to be the final vote adopting draft maps. Yep, and one more thing. The first reading of the ordinance will have to take place on March 16th. So truthfully, by March 16th, the council will have had to have selected a map. So they'll have the first reading in March 16th, the second reading adopting the map in April.
Well, do you feel, Laurie, Brianna, that there has been sufficient time, that we have sufficient time left to clearly understand this redistricting process? Speaking as a community resident and just being brought in, the first I heard of a redistricting map was last summer. So I guess that would have been August. Yes, August. At one of our TCC meetings, I was given a map. There wasn't much said. It was just, put out there. So it wasn't something that was taken seriously, that should have been taken seriously. I mean, I kept the map, and it was something that I filed in my psyche here, and yet something was amiss. There's still a disconnect here. So I'm just wondering, with the time that we have left, are we being given, is that enough time for us to really understand this process and to get the equal redrawing of the lines? I'm really feeling concerned at this point.
This is why I have made a request on behalf of the coalition to be able to give the presentation that I gave tonight to the council members at the meeting on the 23rd, because one of the things that has not happened yet is the council has not had any open discussions where they, speak to the consultant demographer about, questions they have about the maps, requests for adjustments to be made to lines, requests for certain standards to be met. For example, in Visalia and in Tulare County Board of Supervisors, certain supervisors and council members would say to the demographer consultant, can you come back with a map that draws 3 Voting Rights Act districts where you have eligible voter percentage above 55%, or something like that, where they're giving instructions to the demographer consultant. I haven't seen that process unfold yet in the city of Bakersfield. And so we've made a request to the city to be able to present as a map author and to allow other map authors to present their maps to the council in the next hearing. So that there can be a more vibrant, we can move the conversation along where the council members are giving their feedback and giving their instructions to the consultant, because I have not seen it work very well when an elected body is being asked to essentially go through that entire process and select a map in the same hearing, which is what looks like is going to happen, is about to happen here on the 23rd. But I would suggest also that we can talk about this in the Equitable Map Coalition meeting tomorrow night to really get a better sense of what some of the context is and how best to empower people to participate in this process, given what is unfolding, because it's every place is different,
Brianna, could I just make a quick comment on something I think I heard from Laurie?
Yeah, sure. I have a comment too, but please go ahead.
Okay, I think I just want to mention that under the Fair Maps Act, if there have been any amendment to a plan that's a substantial amendment, the council will not be allowed to vote on that plan that evening. They can only vote on a final plan that has been made available to the public 7 days prior. So if we were asked to do any live line drawing by the council, which is something we are able to do, we would have to then post that map, and the council would have to have another meeting in order to vote on that. So just want to make that clear to the community. So they can't make an amendment to a map and vote on it the same day. That's not allowable this time under the Fair Maps Act.
Yes,
So,
I do have that on our timeline, at least for staff to think about as well, since the meeting for their final vote would fall on April 6th. 7 days before that would be March 30th. So by then, in between February 23rd and 30th, there would have to be the map edited, were there any edits, and out to the public for 7 days notice before. And actually, I'm so sorry, I'm looking at the wrong meeting day at my calendar. It would be before the March 16th date. So 16th, 7 days before, is March 9th. So in between, I apologize, in between the 23rd, which is next week, and March 9th, we would have to have any final edits in before City Council could make a first reading of the ordinance on March 16th. And then there might be a question on that. I just wanted to quickly comment for our attendee as well. There was a slight delay this year, and this is, everybody faced this delay. This is not unique to Bakersfield, but there was a slight delay in the release of redistricting data. And you'll see that some of the requirements for the number of meetings also have delays for how many meetings you can have before and after. You can have as many as you want before census data is released, but after census data was released, which for the state of California, they actually use the last addresses for the inmate population. So once that is allocated out, That is what jurisdictions in the state of California are using. So there was some slight delay, and that has to do with the census overall. That being said, if there was a map for our attendee that you saw over the summer, I am assuming that that was a map, a current map, or maybe something promotional. There would not have been any draft maps out prior to the release of the state's redistricting data. But good and salient that you had the issue on your mind very early. I guess the one thing I would add too is there is still time. It is a very quick turnaround, at least for the remainder of our process that we have here. But I do firmly believe that there is still time to get the feedback and to get the turnaround. I say that fully keeping in mind that our consultant is working with many partners across the state. So that is why it is important to get the community feedback and the council feedback and the council members feedback so that we can get direction on which maps we will do a final vote on.
So is the April 6th date is in regard to what the statements that have just been made, is the April 6th date firm?
Oh, the April 6th date is a regularly scheduled meeting of the city council. So that date falls because that's one of the April dates that falls before the deadline. So that's the reason that we've put that as the second reading.
And as the map adoption, to adopt the map.
So oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if somebody else was going to speak. Yes, so that would be when the maps would be adopted. However, there needs to be 2 readings in order to adopt a map. So what Sophia was mentioning before, which is that in between the March meeting and the April meeting, there will be no edits made to any maps that are proposed unless there is another meeting and public notice to where the public has an opportunity to comment on those edits. So truly the final maps that the city council will be adopting should be made available to the public 7 days prior to March 16th. So that would be, and I just pulled it up on my calendar and I could do math, but let me just pull it up one more time. I believe it's March 9th. Yes, so by March 9th, the final maps, and it can be multiple maps, they can have options, but the final maps, no more edits, would need to be out to the public by March 9th. Okay, well, I'm going to, while we pause a little bit, maybe people are thinking I'll give you a moment to kind of absorb everything you're seeing here. Just going to scroll towards the end of our presentation. If you have follow-up questions, if you have questions that come to you after this meeting, if you have input you'd like to submit both to us and to our consultant, after you meet with other community groups, please stay involved. That is really what we are asking for. It helps us out as staff immensely. It helps our consultant out immensely. I have seen so far the quickest way is to email our redistricting inbox. That is something I personally monitor and have access to. We do also have an email list. So when we are making some announcements, updates to the website, we will let that email list know. Again, you can also request a presentation or a meeting. I'm happy to present to your group and relay that feedback to our consultants. And attending public hearings, if you're able to attend those in person, that's great. Also, we can accept comments by email, by phone. Those are options as well. Okay, great. So for those who work with me and know me, former elementary school teacher, and rule of thumb was if nobody says anything after 8 seconds, they're not going to. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close our workshop for tonight. Thank you for those who have attended. Thank you to our panelists who presented. This will be posted on the city's website once we clear up, once we get the edit, or once we get the video onto YouTube, and we want to make sure that our captioning is salient as well. And thank you also to our interpreter and our vendor who was able to make it onto the meeting tonight. Again, please reach out redistricting@bakersfieldcity.us with any questions. We are at your service, and good night, everybody. Thank you for joining.